Welcome, my friends. It's great to see so many of you have registered and showed up for today's discussion to be hosted by Dr. Kim Delaney. My name's Kate. I'm the Adult Services Programming Specialist here at the Algonquin Area Public Library District. I am joined today by my friends and colleagues, Anna of the Crystal Lake Public Library and Jill of Lake Bluff Public Library, and of course, Dr. Delaney. As a reminder, this is just the second event in a series of virtual tours of various Chicagoland cultural institutions and museums, which is going to be presented via Zoom and taking place all of April and May. I'm very proud to be able to offer this series in partnership with 42 suburban libraries that you see listed here on your screen. I would like to extend a sincere thank you from all of us to Dr. Delaney and the DuSable Museum for giving us this experience today. Please remember that you can sign up for any of our upcoming events by visiting your library's online events calendar. I truly hope you enjoyed today's program. So again, if you could please just put your questions in the Q&A. We will get to as many as we can after the presentation ends. And I will be disabling the chat in just a moment here. And we are recording today's presentation. So if for any reason you have to step out early or something comes up, you will be able to view this on your library's YouTube channel shortly thereafter. So that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Delaney, and we're ready to start here.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Now, you just put a lot of pressure. You said 42 suburban libraries, and instantly I got the shakes, but here we go. Okay, so thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to be with you all and to represent DuSable Museum of African American History. And so I was trying to think of something that would be interesting and not redundant, like all of the things, and not even sad or depressing. So I was trying to think of what's good. What would I like to share with you all, with the libraries? And so I have a program I'm going to share with you now, a presentation, and I called it Fly Your Kite, History of Black People in Flight. And basically I focused on Chicago because Chicago has this rich history of African Americans and flight. And we don't hear much about it. And so I'm so fascinated by it that I thought that this would be something interesting to share with you all today. So I'm going to start off with, it's going to let me. Did the screen change for you all? Just want to make sure. Yes, hands up, thumbs up, somebody did it? Okay. Oh, great. Okay. I'm going to start off with this story called The People Could Fly because it kind of sets in context the understanding that the relationship that African Americans have with flight. This is a story called The People Could Fly. It's a folktale by Virginia Hamilton. And so, yeah, let's start that.
The People Could Fly by Virginia Hamilton. They say the people could fly, say that long ago in Africa, some of the people knew magic, and they would walk up on the air like climbing up on a gate, and they flew like blackbirds over the fields, black, shiny wings flapping against the blue up there. Then many of the people were captured for slavery. The ones that could fly shed their wings. They couldn't take their wings across the water on the slave ships. Too crowded, don't you know? The folks were full of misery then, got sick with the up and down of the sea. So they forgot about flying when they could no longer breathe the sweet scent of Africa. Say the people who could fly kept their power, although they shed their wings. They kept their secret magic in the land of slavery. They looked the same as the other people from Africa who had been coming over, who had dark skin. Say you couldn't tell anyone one who could fly from the one who couldn't. One such who could was an old man. Call him Toby. And standing tall, yet afraid, was a young woman who once had wings. Call her Sarah. Now Sarah carried a babe tied to her back. She trembled to be so hard worked and scorned. The slaves labored in the fields from sunup to sundown. The owner of the slaves, calling himself their master, said he was a hard lump of clay, a hard, glinty coal, a hard rock pile wouldn't be moved. His overseer on horseback pointed out the slaves who were slowing down. So the one called driver cracked his whip over the slow ones to make them move faster. That whip was a slice open cut of pain. So they did move faster. Had to. Sarah hoed and chopped the row as the babe on her back slept. Said the child grew hungry. That babe started up bawling too loud. Sarah couldn't stop the feeding, couldn't stop to soothe and quiet it down. She let it cry. She didn't want to. She had no heart to croon to it. Keep that thing quiet, called the overseer. He pointed his finger at the babe. The woman scrunched low. The driver cracked his whip across the babe anyhow. The babe hollered like any hurt child, and the woman fell to the earth. The old man that was there, Toby, came and helped her to her feet. I must go soon, she told him. Soon, he said. Sarah couldn't stand up straight any longer. She was too weak. The sun burned her face. The babe cried and cried. Pity me, oh pity me, said sounded like. Sarah was so sad and starving, she sat down in the road. Get up, you black cow, called the overseer. He pointed his hand, and the driver's whip snarled around Sarah's leg. Her sack dress tore into rags. Her legs bled on the earth. She couldn't get up. Toby was there where there was no one to help her and the babe. Now, before it's too late, panted Sarah. Now, father. Yes, daughter, the time has come, Toby answered. Go as you know how to go. He raised his arms, holding them out to her. Kum yala kum baba tambe. And more magic words, said so quickly they sounded like whispers and sighs. The young woman lifted one foot on the air, then the other. She flew clumsily at first, with the child now held tightly in her arms. Then she felt the magic, the African mystery. Says she rose just as free as a bird, as light as a feather. The overseer rode after her, howling. Sarah flew over the fences. She flew over the woods. Tall trees could not snag her, nor could the overseer. She flew like an eagle now until she was gone from sight. No one dared speak about it. Couldn't believe it, but it was, because they that were there saw that it was. Say the next day was dead hot in the fields. A young man slave fell from the heat. The driver come and whooped him. Toby come over and spoke words to the fallen one. The words of ancient Africa, once heard or never remembered completely. The young man forgot them as soon as he heard them. They went way inside him. He got up and rolled over on the air. He rode it a while, and he flew away. Another and another fell from the heap. Toby was there. He cried out to the fallen and reached his arms out to them. Kum kunka yale kum tambe. Whispers and sighs. And they too rose on the air. They
Okay, I'm going to stop the story there so that you all can go get it and read the rest of it. But you get the gist of it, which is that the people could fly. There's this belief that by people of African descent, the folk tale that people of African descent have this fascination with flying, and it comes out of this story, The People Could Fly. And the idea is that the people could fly, you can escape your circumstances. So in bad situations, oftentimes African Americans imagine that people would just take wings and you can go above whatever the situation is. Any type of oppression or bad situation, you could just fly above it. It's a powerful layered tale, as I have in the notes here, right? It derives from this whole story. This folktale comes from a story about a group of enslaved Igbo Africans from Nigeria, and supposedly they jumped from a slave ship in 1803, and it was, some records show that it was all evidence point that it was to the fact that it was a mass suicide. The enslaved Africans who remained claimed that the people who jumped off the ship flew away, and some said they walked across the water back to Africa. It's kind of this whole escapism to not deal with this reality. So they're not dead, they just flew away. The Gullah Geechee people in the area named that site Igbo Landing. You might have heard that term, Igbo Landing. And they passed down this tale of the people can fly generation through generation until it finally ended up in this folk tale. So this connection begins out of this flying is a magical, mystical kind of escapism tool or survival tool that people could float above their circumstances to a peaceful and a safe space. They could fly high, in essence, above anything they're facing. Flights, music, oftentimes the people could fly. That story's been told across the globe, as it said. Oftentimes people would sing with it, sing when they told the story, or they would talk about that there was singing when the people were flying. And so in that way, music is has served throughout history as this like tail, and it's almost the engine of the flying. Like you start to sing, your spirit connects in a way, and then that lifts you up. This is African American folktale, right? Similarly, in traditional African culture, people don't simply end when their body shuts down, they transition or pass into the next realm of existence. So in African culture, I teach African American studies also at Chicago State University, in addition to being the director of education and programs at DuSable. And in African American studies, the life cycle is a circle. So instead of thinking of someone as died, it's you transition or you pass to the next realm of existence. And so when you die, it's the whole idea that we hear in Christian culture where you leave the body and fly up to the heavens. You earned your wings, so they say, right? In traditional African culture, they said it's the spirit leaving the body and flying back up to the heavens, which were thought to be located in the sky with the sun, the giver of life. This helps to explain why the people could fly. We don't die, we fly. When we fly, we are free. So it's a transition. That's why you have a celebration of life when people pass. They fly away into this peaceful other realm. So that's the background. We hear this theme of flying and freedom. We see it repeated in Black creative production, right? So the Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison had a character, Pilot, right? And she was able to fly so she could be free. Then we had a story, The People Could Fly. We have Maya Angelou's story, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, associating flight with freedom. We have a song by Denise Williams, Black Butterfly. We have the popular song, I Believe I Can Fly. It's all of these things of flying away, right? Flying above whatever the circumstances are, flying and soaring with freedom. Then we attach it to reality. So that's the whole celebration of flight that's traditional in African-American culture. And then we have Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first African-American and Native American female pilot. She lived in Chicago. She went to France to earn her pilot's license. She became very interested in flying, and in June of 1921, went to earn her pilot's license in France. She was the first woman to earn an international pilot's license. The pictures of her, if you Google her, she's just a fashionable Renaissance woman, right? And so she became the motivation for this whole Chicago kind of culture of flight and people being interested in flight, because Bessie Coleman did this courageous thing and went to France and got her pilot's license. She inspired all of these who came behind her. And though we hear a lot about the Tuskegee Airmen, Chicago has a history of flight before that. Cornelius Coffey, first African-American aviator with a pilot's license and a mechanical license. He founded a university here, a non-affiliated university flight school. He did. He also, as a mechanic, created a carburetor that kept the plane cool that's still used to this day. This was his partner in educating pilots, John C. Robinson, and they both applied to the Curtis Wright School of Aeronautics in Chicago, and they were accepted, right? And then when they went to attend, they were denied because they were Black, both of them. But this one, John C. Robinson, he was so interested and just wanted to be in the midst of flight information. So he applied as a maintenance worker for the school. He worked as a janitor. And while on the job, it says he listened in on classes, and at home he read books and papers. He also collected things from the trash, which is the gist of this phenomenal story that fascinates me. We wanted to look at something in our area. The DuSable Museum over in Washington Park over there, we wanted to look at something, talk about something in the area. And I instantly thought of that because I was thinking, nobody knows about this flight information. So he collected this stuff from the trash. And then he found some information in about how to build a plane. He and Coffey together built an airplane themselves. Now they got denied entrance into the school, but they built an airplane themselves. They took it over to Washington Park. Somebody convinced one of the instructors from the school to come and fly the plane for them. They used a lawnmower motor or a motorcycle motor. That's the only part that wasn't included in the information he was able to gather out the trash. So I've seen different accounts. One said lawnmower, one said motorcycle, but it wasn't an airplane motor. Lawnmower or motorcycle motor they put in the plane, and this pilot came from the school and the airplane worked. So when we talk about history and kind of like, can we talk about some part of history that's right where we are, right where the DuSable Museum is located? In that park, they flew this plane that they built themselves way back in the early 1900s. So it's a pretty powerful story. This says, so in 1938, Brown and Coffey, they ended up being the first instructors at the school. They hired them to teach night school. Hundreds of men trained under them. Those men later became Tuskegee Airmen. So we hear about Tuskegee Airmen and all of the history, but we don't hear about where did they come from, right? And who trained them. Chicago is an important part of that history. It's so fascinating to me how Chicago is the first in so many things. They also inspired others across the country to want to be involved in flying, right? They pushed and fought for Black pilots in the Army, which led to the Tuskegee Airmen. So they're a very important part. Willa Brown was married to Coffey, and she was the first African-American woman to earn a pilot's license in the US in 1938. She too was, these pictures, you know how those older pictures are just so cool and chic. She too was a cool woman, cool, just looks so clever. First Black woman Civil Air Patrol officer, first Black woman to receive a commercial pilot's license, first Black woman to run for Congress, right? She helped to found the Coffey School of Aeronautics with aviator Cornelius Coffey, who was her husband. Oh yeah, and so we know about that. You've probably heard about the importance of the Defender and the migration and all of those things. The Defender was the premier paper for people of African descent back at this time. And she was instrumental in establishing a relationship with the Chicago Defender newspaper, which increased visibility for Black aviators' activities in the city and across the country. Here's a little more information. So Time magazine in 1939 ran an article about the shortage of experienced pilots, and Miss Willa and her husband and Mr. Robinson, they proposed a solution to the problem. They said, train African-American men to become pilots, right? And they pushed and fought for that. And their school became part of the government-funded training. They participated of African-American, oh yeah, they had to participate on a separate but equal basis. So they could participate, but we know that segregation was the law of the land and it has to be separate. But they were able to initiate these programs. They provide, though they couldn't train the pilots because their school wasn't recognized in that way, they could provide the training. So they did like a pre-program, like you have a pre-engineering program or something like that. They did a pre-pilots program, and they provided African-American trainees for the pilot training program at Tuskegee Institute, which is very important. It's very important. This program led to the creation of the famed Tuskegee Airmen, and Willa was directly responsible for training over 200 future Tuskegee Airmen and instructors. Little Miss Willa, that she hasn't to me been given her rightful place, but hopefully following this, maybe somebody will do some research. She also earned, I can't see my own notes here. Let's see. Oh, I know that she was the first American woman to have both a pilot's license and a mechanic's license, like her husband had. Here's a picture of some Tuskegee Airmen, right? First Black military aviators in the U.S. Armed Forces. Many were trained in Illinois. This is very important because they built, their training is very important because it shows kind of, again, when we think of flight and this core concept of flying above the circumstances, they built not only the airplane, they also built their own runway at the school out here in Robbins, Illinois. And they, with their own hands, they built it, laid down the ground that they needed and everything, and ran that school. Here's a quote from one of the students. If I can get up there, I'll help change things down here. So this whole idea of flying being a cure to problems is very prevalent in African-American community. Janet Herrmann, she worked as a health inspector in Chicago. She was inspired to fly by a billboard she saw that said, "Birds learn to fly, why can't you?" And so this, again, these are just examples to show how rich this whole desire to fly and this kind of subculture of flying was in Chicago. She wrote Negro Aviation, which was a weekly column for the Chicago Defender. We have Robert Lawrence. He was the first Black astronaut selected to a national space program. He was the only member with a doctorate. He helped develop the space shuttle. And this is back in 1935. Mae Jemison is a more popular one. We've heard of her, the first Black woman in space. She went to Morgan Park High School. I live right next to Morgan Park High School. So when we talk about Chicago, when we talk about your city, all of these things are right in my backyard. I wanted to show, this is a part of DuSable Museum's a current exhibit at Chicago Museum. It's not about aviation per se, but I thought it interesting, this parallel or this connectedness. So continuums and legacies. In Chicago, at DuSable Museum, we have an exhibit that's about Catherine Magnolia Johnson. And here we see, this is about World War I. This exhibit is Captain Magnolia Johnson. This is particularly a section about her. And we have an interview on our website where we interviewed her great grandnephew, but she was involved in serving, she and a few other women were involved in supporting World War I. And so she provided books. She was an educator. She thought that those guys were in the service. Some of them were known to be illiterate, couldn't read and write. So she brought books for them. She was chosen and she went on a mission and brought books to them. She also provided like spiritual services and things like that, Captain Magnolia Johnson. But it's important, why she's important to the aviation that came later is because for World War II, African Americans in Chicago were intentional about having as their goal to fly in the war, to be able to participate in the armed services. And Captain Magnolia Johnson was there first in World War I. She was there doing work and bringing attention to and showing a connection to, a desire to be engaged with armed services. And so she came first. And then we have all of the history I just showed you. I wanted to show that the legacy continues, right? Only about 2.5% of the total Air Force aviators are African American today. There's a program in Chicago called the Young Eagles Program. I have a link there. Chicago has this rich legacy that we need to talk more about to help young people recognize aviation jobs as viable careers, right? We have this rich history. We need to engage young people in this history so that they'll know that it's not something foreign to us, that we were heavily engaged in this, involved in aviation years ago, a whole century ago. And then I thought, how could we pique interest? So when I first heard of this great opportunity, I was so excited. And I said, you know what? I'm going to have a fly day. And that's why I called it Fly Your Kites. And we're going to have people all over watch this presentation and then go out the next day on Sunday and fly their kites. You know, it'll be a great spring event. But the parks are closed, so I can't officially tell you to do that. So I wanted to do it in Washington Park and then just share the history. And that's a way to engage young people, make them interested in flight. This will be an entry point. Hey, let's put together this kite. Let's watch how it soars through the air, blah, blah, blah. Get interested in flight. But again, we weren't able to suggest that as an institution. But clearly, if you'd like to do it yourself, I can't stop you. But fly. Kites have been used for human flight, for military applications, for science and meteorology, photography, lifting radio antennas, generating power, aerodynamics, experiments, and much more. Kite flying in New Zealand, the Maori tribes associated divine meaning to kite. So this whole idea of flying being a spiritual kind of attached to spiritual thing, it doesn't only belong to African Americans. It's a lot of people who believe that. They believe that birds carry messages from men up to the gods, and they shape their kites in the form of birds, right? In addition to religious significance and symbolism, kites were important in scientific experiments, as we just heard. Kites played an important role in aviation history. They were used to launch thermometers and other meteorological devices to measure the atmosphere. Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Graham Bell used kites in their scientific research. So it's not just fun, it's science also, right? The benefits of flying a kite are numerous. They're simple but important. Gross motor skills, right, are sorts of skills required to make big movements and generate lots of power. So just learning how to navigate, keeping that flight up. If you've ever flown a kite, you know what that's like. And it is a skill to that, hand-eye coordination, learning to share and work collaboratively with someone. That's a part of that, following instruction. You said making friends. Again, let me move this. Physical health, creativity, confidence, right? And then the other reward from flying kites is, like I said, to get other people interested in flying. We don't die, we fly your kites. Here's a quote from Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, the late great Toni Morrison. Sugar man done fly away, sugar man done gone. Sugar man cut across the sky, sugar man gone home. That concludes that presentation. And so now I'll try to answer some questions. Hopefully everybody's excited, ready to fly kites and possibly take flying lessons.
Thank you very much, Kim. That was very interesting. All right, let's see if we have any questions here. If you guys are still out there and you have questions for Kim, if you could please put them in the Q&A, I would really appreciate that. But in the meantime, let's see what we've got here.
I wish I was in the plane flying. Like you said, Shed had penguins. It would be great if I could have did this from a cockpit or something, but anyway.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a question. To what extent was the participation by Black people impactful in early aviation?
To what extent was the participation? One more time, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think she's trying to ask how greatly did African American people impact early aviation? Okay,
so again, the research I did, I started kind of with the first flight information being like the late 1800s, right? Or early 1900s. And then Bessie Coleman was the first person I could see that got a license, right? As we see, Black people weren't allowed to enter flight school. So it's the early 1900s, I would say. I thought it fascinating that those two guys built their own plane, but again, planes were already flying when they entered into this field. So that's the extent of my research. I do know that, again, that I could say that Coffee and Robinson, that they did have something to do with the carburetor somebody built to help keep the plane cool. That's still used today on planes. That's a version of that is still used today on airplanes. But as far as just, again, flight education and stuff, they didn't enter into the 1900s.
We have another question that is, why did Bessie Coleman get her license in France?
Oh, that's a good question. So Bessie Coleman got her license in France because she wasn't allowed to go to school here in America to get her license. And she had heard about opportunities where African Americans could go to France. She was just the first female to get that, but she wasn't the first African American to get a license in France. France was a little more open with regard to, America was segregated and there were just some things that African Americans weren't allowed to do, but France allowed her to go. That's why she's the shero of this. And, she became everybody's inspiration because she actually went to France and got that license, And so she went there because she couldn't get it here. Others followed behind her and went to France as well. Others who could afford it, you had to be of a certain ilk, a certain privilege in order to do that. But a few other Chicagoans followed behind her and went to get their license in France as well.
Very cool. Okay, was Pastor Bill Winston of Living Word Christian Center in Forest Park a part of the Tuskegee Airmen?
I don't know. That's a particular person? I don't know. I thought that was the person asking the question. I was thinking, this is going to be a religious question. Let me get ready. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. On that site that I put in the presentation, I'll send you all that, and then maybe you could share out, because on that site, they list the individual, almost all, they list a lot of them, I would say, a lot of the Tuskegee Airmen, but I don't know.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can definitely send that out. For everybody that's still here and listening, Like I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, so I will be sending out the link and we will all have it posted to our YouTube channels probably early next week. So you'll have access to that. And then I'll also send out any links that Dr. Delaney will send to me that you guys have discussed today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to stress the weightiness of the information, though. So we have a scholar, a young scholar, kind of young, who helps us. He does Chicago history. This guy by the name of Dilla, and he it's not his employment; it's just his passion. So he does all of this Chicago history. And he and I were talking. I interviewed him recently, and he and I were talking about what if the youth in Chicago knew this rich history, right? Some of these, like some of the corners where they're standing, where you have other activities happening that maybe shouldn't happen. Imagine if those people there knew these great things that happened there, you know, 100 years ago, what these people did, who had maybe less resources than the people today have. You know, as I said, this guy took a janitor's job and got notes out of the trash can and eavesdropped on conversations, you know, to learn what he could. And so when you think of these circumstances that people were in and they found a way, right, and pressed through, that's a message that we need to share, right? We need to share this greatness. We need to share how they did it. It's not just like the Tuskegee Airmen off somewhere who were fantastic. No, these were these guys from the hood in Chicago, you know, who did these great things and did this training and then went on to make history in this phenomenal way. So I think that's really important. And to know that that plane was flown in Washington Park right there, I'm like, we should have like something out there, put a fake plane out there or something, you know, somebody do a statue. This is important history, you know? Yeah.
That is very true. All right, let's see. We also have a question and a comment. This was great. Dr. Delaney, what is your degree in?
Okay, I have a degree in African American Studies. My bachelor's is in that. I have a master's in creative writing, MFA in creative writing. As you can tell, I'm so dramatic and animated. You know, I'm a creative person. So I have an MFA in creative writing. And my doctorate is in education. So that's what you see in me. African American Studies, and then, you know, this passionate creative that I am, and then education. And I do that's why I educate in this way. Yeah.
Somebody asked, why was the new plane test flight in Washington Park? What made it a good local testing ground versus other parks?
Yeah, in my research, I can't say that I saw anything that spoke to that would answer that, but I would assume just location, because the school was in the inner city, in that area on the south side, and then you have the park there. I know that they built the plane in the lot of a business owner. They let them use the lot. So that must have been not far from there as well. So they built the plane in a borrowed lot of a business owner, let them, you know, do that. And then I would imagine it's just convenience. I would imagine it was just convenience, but I didn't read that anyway. That's just me assuming. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. I think I lost my place here. Lots of people that want to know, when will the museum open for visitors again? I don't know if that's a question you can answer, but lots of people want to come out there and see what you guys have.
Okay, great. We're excited to get people back in the building. We have, you know, we had the historic march. It's the largest of its type. Look at me being dramatic, but it's the truth. It's the largest of its type, the first largest of its type. And that was sponsored by Viola Davis and her husband and Time. And that opened, and right after that opened, we had to shut down because of COVID. So people haven't had, and it is an absolutely awesome experience. You put on a headphone and it's like you're at the March on Washington. You get a front seat to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And so we're trying, that's the hold up a little bit, because we have to adjust that to adapt to COVID, you know, environmental situations. And so we were hoping to open in May, but now it looks like Juneteenth. That's what I'm going to say today. Don't hold me to it. That's what I heard at a recent meeting, that it looks like we're trying to open for Juneteenth because we want to have the march up and ready when we open. The Captain Magnolia Johnson exhibit was new as well. And so we have a lot of new, fresh things for people to see.
Very
Somebody asked, did the first Black airmen / women fly biplanes or single-wing planes? Did they participate in races?
Oh, wow. I was waiting for the question that would stump me, and that's it. So, okay. Did they participate in races? I don't know. I do know that the first plane, that school that they started, one of the women actually bought the first plane so that they could fly, right? And it was a single plane. I do know that. So they were training in single planes. That was the first plane that she bought. The plane that they built was a single plane. And so I don't know if they participated in races. I don't know. Again, I would only be guessing. So I don't want to do that. I don't know. I don't know if they participated in races. But I do know that the planes that they possibly, because of affordability, it was that single plane that they had. That's the plane they trained people in. That's the plane that they bought. Again, it's Women's History too. Look, Women's History Month just passed. Look at this. A woman bought that plane, a woman. You know, women were involved in this training. A woman was the motivation. Here in Chicago, a woman was the motivation to start all these people. A woman went to France and got that license and started all that. And so, please Google it. You see all these cool pictures of these people. You know, those flight clothes are so cool anyway. You see all these people, they look so confident and like, you know, sure, like they had fun. So yeah, that's all I know. I don't know if they did races. I'm not sure. I didn't read anything about them doing races.
cool. Well, on the topic of kind of the women's history part of this, are there any Chicago streets or schools named after Bessie, Willa, Jenna, or Catherine?
Oh, wow. Bessie Coleman. There was a school in Chicago that I recall, Bessie Coleman School. There was, yeah. I don't know if it still exists, you know, with all the closures and stuff. I'm not sure, but there was a school called Bessie Coleman. The others, Catherine and Magnolia Johnson, no. Her story is kind of just coming to the, you know, I've seen a couple of things. It's covered like maybe 2018 or something. They start covering that. So I haven't seen that. So I would say, I'm not sure. Bessie Coleman, yes, but the others, I'm not sure.
Somebody asked you, actually, I'll do this other one. A lot of people were wondering what other kind of presentations you do and what are the other current exhibits that are happening that will be coming up at the museum. Okay.
So I do all kinds of exhibits. That's why my brain's so frazzled, because I am the encyclopedia of Black history. I try, but it's spaced out, you know, whatever the company, like we've done, DuSable Museum is very important to note the work that we do. So it's not just a museum, it's also like the leader in community education for African-American history. It really is. I teach at Chicago State also, but DuSable Museum, we get more requests even than I do in the Black Studies Department, African-American Studies Department at Chicago State, right? And so I do presentations for different industries. Like if somebody is doing something, I can't retain all the information, but I know all the core concepts. So if somebody has a particular industry, I'll just go research and call all my friends and get the information for that particular industry and then present that. What I enjoy most is core concept presentations, because that's what I'm good at. It's too much information. I can't retain all that information. I never could, but I could blame it on I'm getting old now. And so what I can do is give you a few facts, but the core concepts that undergird all of this history and African-American life, I got those down pat. I know those for sure. I enjoy doing, I do this thing I created called Everything's an Argument that looks at like how to understand cultural lenses, right? So like something in one culture is understood in one way, and then in another culture, it might have a different meaning. That's why I started with The People Can Fly, because I wanted to set the context for this mystical kind of spiritual connection to flight, right? For Black people. So it's this fantastical thing, right? That's really, really respected. So if you're an African-American pilot, even for an airline or something, you get big respect, because it's and oftentimes young people don't even know what it is. It's just passed, you know how tidbits are passed generational, that's important and that's prestigious and that's, you know, powerful. And so I do presentations that look at how we understand information a lot. And then I'll do specialized presentations. I also taught elementary school over at St. Sabina with Father Flager. He had me over there for a few years. I taught high school. So it depends on the audience that I'm talking to. And then I shape the presentation around that. And there's a collective of African-American scholars who are my friends that I lean on to help me do those presentations. Because I can't retain it all.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of people want to point out that Bessie Coleman Drive is near O'Hare Airport. So I guess
Okay.
that's weird, but thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Very cool. Another interesting question somebody asked, I heard about Bessie Coleman in the same story as Amelia Earhart. Did they know each other?
I don't know. That wasn't in my research. I could look it up though. I could call and ask somebody. I could call and ask somebody and they might know. I don't know if they knew. I don't know. As my brain is calculating, I'm remembering something as well. It might just be them mentioned in a story. I have to say I don't know at this moment.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, is it possible that African Americans participated in aviation in America before they were officially recognized by law?
Yes. That one, I could say yes. Now, African Americans actually, and I like that somebody brought that up. So most things that we were not allowed to do, we engaged in anyway. And so in some text, you'll hear little stories about different things. We engaged in anywhere, but it didn't it's underground things, you know, just like when people say, oh, well, they didn't open schools to them. Well, we had schools already. They weren't legal, but they were teaching, they had classrooms. And so I'm going to say yes for that. I do know that to be fact that they participated, but this is the first thing of record that I could find, especially when we're looking at about Chicago. I know that Chicago was second to only LA back with this whole culture of aviation for Black people back in the early 1900s. LA was the only place bigger. And I do know that I have heard tales, not in this research, but about Black people experimenting with flight before this. Yeah.
Okay.
We even hear, let me add this. So I even hear when you hear of Tulsa, you know, my brain is slow, I said. You hear of Tulsa when we talk about Black Wall Street, you heard that generic term and what happened there, where the records show that they had airplanes. And that happened in 1921. Tulsa, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street, what happened there? That was 1921. They had planes before that. That was before this. Yeah.
Okay. Now I lost my spot. Hold on. It was a good question.
Uh-oh.
Do you want me to go?
Oh, I see it. Sorry, Joe, 1 second. What does the future of Black aviation look like?
Yeah, so with your help, it'll look rich and full. With your help, we have, what's the number? 42 suburban libraries here. So now you have this information. I'm depending on you to help me answer that question. I could say again that we're 13 African Americans, 13% of, I always use this number to go back to because we're 13% of American population. So I always kind of expect at least 13%. I don't cry, I won't cry about it not being like 50, it's not a 50-50 thing, but at least 13% of most things. And we are, what number did I tell you? I don't know, 2%. So I think that I can't say what it will look like, but I can say that with your help, it could be, we can help to whet appetites and make people interested in aviation. I know that I can't think of anything that this program in Chicago that the link is in the presentation for, that program, and there are a couple of other programs that work to share the history of Blacks in aviation, but also to promote interest, to promote interest in it. But I can say for sure that they need to be expanded and funded and enhanced, broadened. So again, I'm writing this date down. We got 42 suburban libraries here. So I'm writing this date down, and we're gonna note this as the date we re-sparked an interest in aviation. And 18, 20 years from now, we'll look at the records, and hopefully there'll be a big increase in African-American people involved in aviation.
How were these amazing professional African-American ladies perceived by the society based on their great results in aviation, astronautics, and medical field? Were they able to motivate, encouraging movements for women of color to participate in?
Yes, they were the heroes. And again, because they, I found it interesting that in all of my research, I didn't find anything that talked about, not in a clear, distinct way, talked about the chicness of the men, but I did see that about the women. They talked about the fashion and what she wore, almost like our presidential campaigns, like, what is she wearing? So they talked about what they were wearing, even sometimes more than they did their great accomplishments, right? So, but because of that, they were highly celebrated, and they got a lot of attention. It wasn't always purely for the right reasons, because some of them, like, okay, this is the first this, the first that. But then I'm researching and I'm saying, oh, wow. And she went to medical school, and she had, she did all of these other great things, like Mae Jemison, that her being first female astronaut, that's like a small part. She went on to do all this other great stuff that we never hear about. First is always highlighted, but I think we have to do a better job of women's history. And we're doing it now with Women's History Month, pulling out some of these other facts. Most often in history, when you look at the history of all of these phenomenal men characters, there are women working in those spaces as well, right? Making those things happen. And so to answer that question, they were respected. They were motivation for people in those days, because again, Bessie Coleman was the motivation for all of these others when they saw that she did it and she could do it, and that pulled other women and men into that field. And so they were respected. I don't think that they were recorded and memorialized in the same way as they probably would have been if they had been men. Because again, I had to dig to find out these histories about, but it is in a paper here and there. But I would like to see a statue of so-and-so somewhere. I would like to see this stuff. And I haven't seen that, but you can Google it and find it in some books and stuff. Yeah. So they're there. They were celebrated. They're there. They just weren't pulled to the front of the historical record.
Absolutely. So guys, we just have time for a few more questions. If you're still here, when the webinar ends, there's going to be a short survey that's going to pop up. If you have a few seconds, if you could just fill it out for us, it'd be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, it will be included in the follow-up email, which will also contain the link to the recording that's set to come out in a couple days. But before we wrap up, this is a good question. Are there any books or movies you would recommend about this topic? It was very fascinating.
Okay, so there are, let me send them to you. I didn't memorize them, but let me send them to you all, and you could share it out with the recording, maybe put it in the information at the bottom of the recording, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. We can share all the lists and all of the links that you would like to. I can get those out to everybody that was here today.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, I think we have time for one more. Jill, if you want to pull one more question from the Q&A for us.
Yeah, just somebody had asked and wanted to highlight if there are any virtual events or lectures coming up from the museum.
Thank you, because I was, as you asked me the question, I'm telling myself to remember to go back to the museum. So the museum, okay, so we have been working diligently to create virtual information, virtual tours, interviews and things like that. So we have a brand new website. This is our 60th anniversary this year for DuSable Museum. And so we have a brand new website, and it has our Code Black series, which is a series we created when COVID came about. We created last year, and we handle hot topics. And so we have several of those on there. Those are pretty interesting. I've done interviews like with Catherine Magnolia Johnson's great grand nephew. I have that interview on there. We have interviews with other people that Margaret Burroughs, Dr. Burroughs influenced. She started the museum and she influenced those people. So we have a lot of content on there, and we're constantly creating more virtual content. And you know what? I think that's going to be now forever, because we've had to do it. Now that's going to be forever. And I like it because we can have more space to do. We're looking at new virtual exhibits that we can do because we don't have the space, on site to do all of those. So we're looking for now ways to put more virtual exhibits like the old ones on the DuSable site, and then new ones. We're doing one called Family Histories, looking at these different families and how to kind of encourage people to keep their items and how to tell their own families. Every family has a fascinating facts in it, right? And when you throw away your grandmother's things or something like that, those things are, and just in those things, we can find rich details that kind of help us time travel and help to set the context for those periods of time. So that exhibit is gonna help to encourage people and show people how to preserve those histories. But right now, currently on the new on the new DuSable Museum website, we do have some virtual presentations.
Yeah, very cool. You're right, though. That's one thing that this pandemic has brought us. It's the ability for all of us to be here together today.
Yeah.
Certainly not something, that would have been possible or that I would have thought of before all of this came about. So.
Yeah. So that's the good out of it. Now, I think it's forever changed the way that we learn, right? How cool is that we could have 42, I keep looking at this number, 42 libraries here together without people having to really interrupt their schedules in a major way,
Yeah. Definitely a positive. So again, guys, thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Delaney. That was a great presentation. Your enthusiasm and just your passion was felt by all. You got lots of great comments. So if you guys could please come up that survey for us, we'd appreciate it. And that's it for us today. I will see a lot of you again next week when we visit the Garfield Park Conservatory.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Delaney.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.